Oh, that's okay. We have 2 minutes. We still have 2 minutes.
Is the time yet?
2 more minutes.
2 more minutes. All right, we got 2 more minutes. Is this on? Yeah. Okay, this is going to be a challenge, right? Huh? It's going to be a challenge. Can you guys all hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yay! They can hear me. Hey. Okay. We're going to get started here in just a couple minutes. As you know, we're all having to wear masks, so if you're without a mask, please forgive me, but I have to remind you to put your mask on. And it's not us that's dictating this to us. It's our campus rules and stuff. If you look up at campus, look up directive number 22. And you'll see it there all in black and white for you to see what we have to deal with. Right?
Right.
He's got it. Anyway, so today I have Nick Fuentes here. He is a student of Martha Masters, who is in charge of the guitar ensemble, the classical guitar ensemble. And I'm going to let him introduce himself and give you a little more information on why he's here. Okay. And the fact that we're going to enjoy this discussion. So,
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, my name is Nick Fuentes. I'm in the last semester of my Master's of Music degree as a classical guitar performance major. And I am here to present for you guys today. Well, actually, I'll be doing 6-class set once every other week at the same time on the early music of Los Angeles. And so for today's class, what we are going to be doing is looking a little, I kind of want to start at like 1850s, but we're going to look a little further leading up to 1850s for the next class of, the settlement of the Los Angeles area and the music that was being played and performed during that time. So here we go. So first off, the area of Southern California was, inhabited by indigenous people prior to the Spanish or Europeans coming from overseas. So the indigenous people had already occupied this land for over 20,000 years before. The people of the Los Angeles area, or the Los Angeles Basin specifically, they were the Quiche people. When the Spanish came as missionaries, they first, would call them Quichereños, and which means, or the people of the willow houses. And later, after building the missions, Spanish would come in. They'd build a mission like the San Gabriel mission, and all the indigenous people that were around would be, Gabrieleños. That's what they would refer to them as. And so these people, they numbered between 5,000 to 10,000 people. They had over 31 sites of their that they lived at, and per site was about 300 to 500 huts per village. They were peaceful people. They were not prone to war or murder. They didn't fight amongst themselves. They had a religious belief in a higher power which they descended from the north. But they really, in their religious beliefs, didn't have any concept of evil, or, as we would say, like the devil or the dark side of a religion. So the Gabrieleño community and culture went into a rapid decline after the Spanish established the mission San Gabriel in 1771. The Gabrieleño were increasingly convinced, lured, or even forced to joining the mission, and upon converts, baptized as neophytes, pressed into abandoning their native village, culture, religion, and language. As legal wards of the mission under Spanish law, neophytes were subjected to the padres as if they were their own children. Unable to make key decisions, independent of the padres, certainly never allowed to leave. Soldiers assigned to protect the missions were commonly abusive, but especially outside the mission. And in sad contrast to the long romanticized images of early California, the actual experience for the native people of Los Angeles area, or the indigenous people from all around, upon the arrival of the Spanish through the 20th century, proved to be a nightmare. They were subjugated to loss, disease, rape, abuse, and death. So here we have it says here a drawing, but I believe it looks more like a print from 1859, the California Magazine. This is by artist Charles Null, and it's just depicting an indigenous woman from the California area picking and gathering acorns. And then here we have a replica of a Gabrielino structure or a hut. This is what they would make their homes in. This particular replica is located at Heritage Park in Santa Fe Springs, just a little away, actually my hometown. It's where I grew up, went to Santa Fe High School. And as a child, going through school, I went through this hut many times, and in researching for this presentation, it surprised me that, it kind of all came back in a big loop. So you can actually go see that structure there at Heritage Park. So Los Angeles was first founded as a pueblo in 1781 by northern Mexican pioneers. The Los Angeles Puebladores, or townspeople, were a group of 44 settlers and 4 soldiers from Mexico who established the famed city in 1781 in what we now call California. The settlers came from various Spanish castes, with over half the group being of African descent. The governor of Las Californias, Spanish renowned owned region, Felipe de Neve, called on 11 families to help build the new city in the region by recruiting them from Sonora and Sinaloa, Mexico. According to the census record taken at that time, there were 2 persons of African ancestry, 8 Spanish and black persons, and 9 American Indians. There was also 1 Spanish and Indian person, with the rest being Spaniards. According to the efforts of historian William M. Mason, the actual racial makeup of the Pobladores was perhaps more racially balanced than not. Mason wrote that of the 44, only 2 were white, while 26 had some manner of African ancestry, and that 16 of the group were mestizos, which is a mix of Spanish and indigenous people. Black Mexicans, Luis Quintero and Antonio Mesa, the only 2 named in the 1781 census, married mixed women and bore several children between them. The Pobladores founded the city El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora la Reina de Los Angeles sobre el río Porciúncula, which is the Spanish for the town of Our Lady Queen of Los Angeles on the Porciúncula River. That day, after some priests, so in 1781, the Spanish had already established the San Gabriel mission 10 years prior to that. Now here we have a portrait on your left of Neve, who was the 4th governor of Spanish California. And on the right, we have a statue that actually resides there at the Los Angeles Plaza in downtown LA. So the name Los Angeles was actually established well before the city was ever formal. In 1769, Jose Galvez organized a series of expeditions to the area. The Los Angeles River was named El Río de Nuestra Señora la Reina de Los Angeles. by Captain Gaspar de Portola, which this is a picture of him right here. The popular name for the pueblo was El Pueblo de la Reina de Los Angeles. All right, so we're gonna start getting into some of the early music that we actually have records of, which was, of course, from the church or the mission San Gabriel. It was the fourth California mission to be established. The mission was founded on September 8th, 1771 by Friar Junipero Serra. Between 1788 and 1832, Mission San Gabriel had between 1,000 to 1,700 native people living within its boundaries. Of course, this is it's an artist representation of Mission San Gabriel and mission life a little bit outside. You can see the hut of the Gabrielino people, and kind of just shows us a little bit of how life was there in the mission. This postcard comes from, the early 1900s. It's just a postcard depicting the mission, and just to give you guys an idea of how it looked. I don't know if any of you have ever visited that mission. I have recently tried to look to go visit it. This is another picture taken early 1900s, and artist representation of the interior. This seems like it's probably from a postcard as well. That might have been for sale at the mission when you visit. Now, the reason why I couldn't visit the mission is because there was a recent arson fire in July of 2020. This is a picture of how the interior looked after the fire, which I did read the news on this, and recently, or they will be rebuilding the mission and presenting it again for its 250th anniversary soon. California mission music. During this period, up until about 1834, was documented as religious music. Gabrielinos gathered there each day and sang an alabado, a praise song, at dusk, and a bendito or grace before each meal. In 1776, Pedro Font, a Franciscan from Mexico, visited the mission and led a mass that he accompanied on his psaltery, which is a medieval instrument much like the dulcimer, just a board with a bunch of strings on it. Until 1834, the singing of mass was always accompanied by instruments such as flutes, violins, and trumpets that the local Indians were taught to play by missionaries. So the most famous of the missionaries who taught music was Narciso Duran. He was active in teaching Western music to the Indian neophytes of California missions. Although there was other padres that taught music at all the missions throughout, he actually was not stationed at San Gabriel. He was stationed in San Jose and Santa Barbara, but he did travel around to the different missions. He was very successful in his teaching of music to the neophytes. Duran had taught the instruments by seeing the distances between the notes on their instruments. So in early music like this of the church was all about the singing and the praising during Mass. But when the missionaries did come into the areas, one of the first ways to even communicate with the indigenous people that you don't have the same language as, is to introduce music and to maybe get on a language of music before teaching language and learning the language of the people. So Duran would teach the instruments first, having the neophytes play the instruments, learning and listening and singing along while they are playing to understand the intervals of singing notes up and down. He would have them playing music or singing the music together in homophonic way, which everybody is singing the same melody. They weren't singing like 2 parts or 3 or 4 part harmonies together, which would be much more complicated. And so he had made him play and sing at the same time so that the intervals of different keys would not be any trouble. They would read the voice parts from a staff dotted with notes, and he used a specific system of notation which was colored in red, black, yellow, and white. And of course, he would always have the instruments accompany them. So one description of the small orchestra by Harrison Dale, who was part of an 1826 expedition to the San Gabriel Mission, stated that the band had played for 2 hours, consisting of 2 violins, 1 bass viol, a trumpet, and a triangle. They made tolerably good music. The music of the Mass was well selected, and the Indian voices were very harmonious with flutes and violins accompanying them. The mission developed an extensive repertoire. They performed plain chants for several masses and proper mass on Sundays and feast days. The 2 and 4 part homophonic masses, such as the Misa de Cataluna and the Misa Visacana, both are likely compositions of Father Duran. Also practiced were Vespers and compiled, as well as hymns. So here, it is very hard to find examples of the music being played. We do have Duran's book of compositions, and people do try to, or get together to play this music after this advertisement. All right, here we go. So this is a morning hymn. So I particularly picked this example because, like, from the first-hand account of them playing, there was accounts of a triangle being played, and I could hear that instrumentation is simple. Of course, we hear female voices in this recording. They would all be probably young boy neophytes singing. I think they're singing it again, translated into English. And let's listen to one more here. Hymn to the Blessed Virgin Mary. You can hear the clapping in the back. There's a very Spanish rhythm there. And then I will play one more of actual the music you would hear during the Mass. This is part of the Alleluia. All right, and then here we have another example. So that example had brass instruments. There are a few accounts of, some brass instruments being played. I don't know if that group was actually transcribing actual, the vocal music for brass. But like I said, for this era, it is, with no recording technology or even photograph technology back then, hard to find good examples. So this is a colorized drawing of Father Duran with his neophyte group of musicians. Oh, we already played that. Whoops. We already had a good example. Actually, let's hear this. So the Gloria from a Mass, not composed by Father Duran, but another. All right, so this is just a short video that I found talking about mission music. It has some very good information and examples. That I would share with you guys.
The Salinan people came and originated in this area from the last ice age. We, the Salinan people, lived in an extraordinary harmony that emanated from culture passed from one generation to the next generation to the next generation. We were a nomadic tribe. We wandered in our area in this beautiful weather and survived that way for thousands and thousands of years. We had an interruption from other civilizations that appeared on our horizon. What changed our culture? Why were we needing to adapt just in order to survive?
The Franciscan missionaries who came to California in the summer of 1769 weren't prepared to deal with encountering the Native Americans of California, who were a truly remarkable, very self-sufficient people. In effect, the Padres were intruders in their midst, and they realized that they had to reach the people on a certain level, and this is where mission music and mission art comes together with it.
During the mission period, music was a lure. When a friar came to establish a mission, he didn't share any words, any language, any grammar with the people with whom he found himself. Well, the common language was music. So when a friar came and invited you to sing, it was a sign of respect and of divinity. And those two cultures at that point resonated because they understood that music is important and they were embarking on the same journey to elevate the Creator.
When this mission was founded in 1772 and the ensuing decades, if I'd entered this church, we'd see mostly local Californians, a lot of Chumash and Salinan and indigenous First Nations people here in our church. And there would be several sort of styles of music.
Juan Bautista Sancho at Mission San Antonio brings the full experience of European music into California, initially as a religious experience, but it invariably becomes a social experience also. So it's not a great leap from the sacred music of the church performed in almost a strictly European style as it gradually adapts and changes itself to the popular music of the larger community. And he moves from the sacred to the fandango, to the overwhelming joy of the social celebration with music, which happened right here in this mission garden and at every other mission garden.
Of all the repertoire in California mission period, the most important piece would have been the fandango. And the great thing about the fandango is it's the audible musical photograph of equality, fraternity, and liberty. That basically Anyone can dance the fandango. So you could be the viceroy, you could be the king, you could be the duke, you could be Mutsun, you could be Salinan, you could be Chumash, you could be from Mexico. You were welcome to dance the fandango. And it was another illustration of the equality of California and the dance experience outside the mission, which was a replication of life in the mission.
I understand the fandango was when our Native American young maidens were brought out to the young soldiers. My lineage is from the very first recorded marriage in California. She was a full-blooded Salinan that married a young teenage Spanish soldier.
If you look at treatises of the time and letters of the time, they all talk about the passion and fervor of the fandango. It usually starts with the couple circling each other and looking at each other, and it builds in excitement and excitement and excitement.
This idea that music unites us is a very, very important theme. It reassures us. It tells us there is something beyond where we are at this particular moment. Music will tell us that there is still hope. There are aspirations. And that was translated by the Padres. They saw it as a wonderful catechetical tool that said there is more than just living, doing what you're doing now. You can hope for something better in the future.
Okay, so that leads us from, what I really enjoy about that video is that it starts off with the mission music, music of mass and, you know, religious music, talking about the fandango, which after the mission period, the fandango is more of a secularized music of the people outside the mission or outside the church. So in 1821, Mexico won its independence from Spain. And by 1833, Mexico had declared that all mission lands were to be secularized. So what they did is they put the mission system into place, or the rancho system, sorry. And at this point, Duran, Father Duran, had made a plea to then Governor Pio Pico that many of the neophyte musicians had run away. He did not mind that they ran away, except that he had put 12 years of labor into teaching them how to play music. And of course, when Mexico secularized the mission lands, this made it harder for and more inequalities for the native people. But many say the mission system made them dependent. The hacienda or rancho system was put into place, and then in 1833 we get the golden age of California, and the life of the ranchero life they had a craving for music. Many women were talented guitarists and men with the violin. And almost all families had one or more musicians that would play music in the household and all around. So So regardless of the political uncertainty of the area, life in California began to flourish. Large families and their rancheros lived carefree Arcadian lives, with plentiful amounts of cattle, which could be used for trade for items that could not be provided by the land. The ranchero life had a craving for music. Many of the women were guitarists. Music always accompanied special events such as weddings, rodeos, feast days, funerals, and other events. After most events, dances such as fandangos or bailes were held. Fiestas would continue for several days. Big events like weddings could top over 100 guests. And after the celebration of music and dance, the guests would sleep, wake, have a picnic, and start the dance and celebration again. We have some pictures here. Of course, these ain't particular pictures of Southern California. Hard to find specific examples of the Los Angeles area here. But, you know, just depicting the life on the rancho. Forms of secularized music and entertainment. Music always accompanies special events. Here I have one example of a song that would be sung at a funeral.
Dios te salve, bella aurora, Dios te salve, luz del día, Dios te salve, sol y estrella, y Dios te salve, María. Eres llena de hermosura, llena de amor y eficacia, llena de mil bendiciones, llena toda de gracia. Eres reina poderosa, tú venciste al enemigo, eres todo nuestro amparo, pues el Señor es contigo. Bendita la hizo Dios Padre, bendita del Hijo eres, bendita del Santo Espíritu, bendita entre las mujeres. Bendito el Dios que te crió, bendito el día en que naciste, bendito el nombre que tienes, bendito el fruto que diste.
Okay, so of the forms of music that accompanied these fiestas and dances, the baile was more of a formal dance music, and informal were the fandangos. Other dance genres of the time were the waltz and the quadrilles, which is a type of square dance. The church didn't, they were against the waltz, as it was more of a promiscuous dance in their minds. And the music for these dances usually consisted of harp, violin, and flute. These events, you know, we're talking about the weddings and these big fiestas that would last for days. One account is that the wedding of Pio Pico to his wife, Maria Alvarado, in 1834 lasted 8 days in Los Angeles. Forms of music consisted of the formal baile and the informal fandango. And yeah, so we have here, the most popular was the fandango, which featured a telecorrero, or master of ceremonies. He would call out each woman for her turn. During this event, eggshells filled with confetti were broken over the heads of the participants. They would improvise songs. Males and females would improvise comedic rhymes that would complement each other's beauty and grace for those they admired. Then the whole group would join in during the chorus. All musical performances during this time required permission from the judge and a license fee of 2 pesos. There was also an ordinance that required that anybody who would wander around the streets serenading without permission could be fined. The second time they would be fined a little bit more money, and if they were caught a third time, they were, arrested and punished by law. Oh, funny, doing the research for this, and reading about how the fandangos use these eggshells, and I've heard of these stories in Mexico that this is a tradition to do when you gather with each other, but before ever researching and reading that this was happening in early, Los Angeles and California, I have a friend of mine who's a little older, 10 years older than me, in his 50s, and that's how he met his wife, as a teenager, both living up here in Los Angeles, but went down to go visit families. They saw each other at one of these kind of events, and his cousins, telling him, hey, you got to take this eggshell and go crack it on the girl that you like or admire, and so he did that, and just now they're happily married with 4 children, living in wonderful. He's a good guy. He's actually what is at the ports? What are the guys that work at the ports? Can't remember. Well, anyway, he's in the San Pedro ports. All right, so here, this is just an example that I could find of a replication of what a fandango might have looked like back then with the music. Whoops. Don't go there. It's a big screen, but I can't get it bigger than that. Whether they were playing Old Susanna or not, I'm not too sure. Of course, maybe they were. Okay, so American immigrants that migrated to California from the United States, remember this is just a little pre-gold rush, so there wasn't the explosion yet coming from, you know, the east into the west, but these early American immigrants, they would assimilate into Mexican life and culture and often married into families and learned to speak Spanish fluently. The music of the Californios, along with social customs, continue to be influential throughout the Southwest, even after the arrival of all the rest of the Americans. There was a custom in which so there was also these customs in which the eldest member of each family would rise early in the morning before the sun, when they could see the first, morning stars, and start to singing a hymn, which would alert the other family members in the household, who would rise and start singing along. And this happened from house to house and street to street until the whole town was filled with music. Leading into the 1850s, Mexico started preparing for conflict with the U.S. for California territory after the annexation of Texas. Pio Pico, the governor of the territory, moved the capital from Monterey to Los Angeles and continued with secularization, separating church and state. The best lands were privatized, with the native Indians exploited as laborers. California started to be more incorporated into the American economy. All right, so in 1846, we have American soldiers, a group of Marines who entered into California, led by Commodore Stockton. And at this point, Pio Pico and General Castro fled. Noting a fondness for music by the native Angelinos, Commodore Stockton suggested that the band play each evening in the plaza around sunset. So here we have another example, similar to when the Spanish came, and the first language, or to not cause major conflict, was to introduce music and play music, as it would help subdue instead of fighting. American soldiers entered in California. So after Stockton had his band playing in the plaza each evening, and we would have stories, of course, of the children starting to peek around the corners, interested in what's going on in the plaza. The elders would come out and listen to the music and give shouts of "Viva!" And soon people from the ranchos from the far distance would hear this music in the evening and would start coming in later on the various days. It was said by the priest of the Mission San Gabriel that music would do more in conquest of California than 1,000 bayonets. So this is kind of concluding what I'm leading up to for this class. Next class we will get into the 1850s, where Los Angeles is well more established. We start getting the entertainment in the theater and music of the plaza. But this is military band music of the Civil War, which is basically around almost the same time. So couldn't find specific examples of what the band was playing in the plaza when they marched into Los Angeles, but I am sure it sounded something similar to this music here. Military band music always was horns and brass instruments, drums and percussion. Okay, so yeah, military band music. We'll also, in the further classes, be talking about that in the Los Angeles area. It was very big during this time prior to the turn of the century, as not just in military, but in public groups that would get together and play band music. We'll talk about when John Philip Sousa himself came to Los Angeles to perform with his band. I always enjoy military band music, especially thinking about Sousa and the Marine Corps band, because I'm a Marine Corps vet myself. And yeah, so this concludes my presentation for today. We will be getting into lots more music. It's all coming about, and plus we will be getting into like the first recordings of when the phonograph was invented, and a man named Charles Lummis started recording music of the people in the Los Angeles area. I just want to thank everybody who came today to enjoy the class. Also, everybody who's watching us via stream and Zoom, and Ali and everybody here at OLLI for having me and allowing me to give this presentation to gain some experience. Yeah, does anybody have any questions for me?
Did Sepulveda, was he mentioned? I saw Pico, but I never saw Sepulveda.
You know, I didn't hear, in my research, I didn't read much about Sepulveda. The majority of it was just Pico as being like, you know, the era I'm talking about, he was the last, you know, official Mexican governor of California. But yeah, Pico. There's also Pico's Ranchero is still over here in Whittier. I don't know if you guys ever visit there. It's a cool little area to go see, you know, his house and all that stuff. But yeah, I didn't get much information about Sepulveda.
You had mentioned that some of the people would be fined. Why did they feel they needed to go after them for making music?
You know, I think at this time, in the very beginning establishment of like a city or a town like that, and seeing how much music is a part of the community, it's probably a way to raise money for the town and to kind of control that aspect of, you know, in a sense, you know, being taxed for playing music or to raise funds for the city, yeah.
Any other questions here?
Any other questions?
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Okay. The, that one, was it Clementine? No.
Oh, Susanna?
Oh, Susanna, that's it, thank you. Was that they adapt that then in Spanish? Or what?
No, I think just in that example, whatever, you know, the video that I showed you was really, they were just showing a replication or whatever event they were holding. They probably were just having fun and playing extra music.
They didn't, okay, so
yeah, that's not, yeah.
Okay. It isn't like what the British, it isn't like what the colonists did when the British, they used to use the British songs and then change words over to English. So is that pretty much?
I think that's just what they were doing in that event that they were holding. They were playing that just for fun. In that video, the earlier examples of the music probably is what we would have heard in the Los Angeles area at that time during the Fandango. But yeah, not old Susanna. I think they were just having fun and then translating the English lyrics into Spanish as well.
Okay, because I could understand some of the words, you know, as soon as I figured out what it was. And I go, oh, okay, I know what that is. And the band music, did they adapt that from Sousa, or did they have their own composers?
Well, there was many composers of like military band music or for brass ensembles at that time, and of course that was all happening back east. Okay. Yeah, American music back east was just an explosion of everything from, of course, all coming from Europe, but classical orchestra music, opera music, And then, yeah, we have like the folk music, like Old Susanna and things like that happening, along with, you know, we're talking about California where, you know, Americans hadn't totally pushed into California yet, but, you know, you have the music of the African American slaves and how their music is like colliding with European music, and like New Orleans, you get the explosion of jazz and things like that. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? We're going to let you off the hook now.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining me.
Thank you, Nick. Very good.